I think
Maybe?
so.
Maybe? Sort of, kind of? Maybe? Okay. Okay. I always have to listen to make sure that the
Hmm.
highs are really real before I get excited.
Agreed, as you should.
I'm melting. How are you?
Also melting, I believe we had a 79% humidity today, which is absurd. I've been swimming through my living room today.
Hi, LJ.
Hey,
What is
LJ.
this interesting? You've got like a top fan badge going on there. I've never seen that before.
I haven't either. Is that
That's
something that
cool.
that's interesting? I'm wondering, is that something that yeah, I'm wondering if that's something that YouTube awards.
Yeah, like we've reached some new
Yeah.
pinnacle of things.
No,
Nothing you did there.
yeah, I know. I think it's something you did do is you've been here.
Yeah.
you yeah, you are one of our number one fans. You're here.
Hey, you know
That's
what? It's
that's
about
awesome.
time. It's about time you two rewarded somebody for something, right? Like,
Right. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
oh,
Oh,
look,
look.
Jan's got one too. Hi, Jan.
Oh, this is
Wow.
this is very interesting. This must be some kind of new like I don't know, like is it in a word system or like a
Well, you know what? It makes the chat look more like Twitch.
it does.
Yes, it looks rather
Very
twitchy.
interesting. It does.
Right. So, hey, you know what? I mean, it's funny. On Twitches, I find it's not as noticeable because it's like next to your screen name, where on here,
Mhm.
like it's
Mhm.
very like pow. But
Yeah.
that's
Well, yeah,
interesting.
that's cool. We'll have to check into what this is after the fact and see if
Well,
it's
I clicked
something.
on it
Yeah.
for when LJ first did it. I clicked
Mhm.
on it, and
Yeah.
it shows top fans.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh,
Um,
here's the question mark. Top fans. It's a leaderboard, a place for fans to stand out in the community. The top 3 get special badges in live chat. It resets every stream, so you can always try again. Oh. How
Interesting.
do you get on the leaderboard? You will need to collect experience points.
Ooh.
Here's how you get them. Send live chat messages, send super chats and super stickers. Okay, so just the fact that you talk to us, that's getting you this VIP status. I love it.
Hmm.
That's so cool. Yay!
It also sounds like a new little function to maybe like run a giveaway off of.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So, aside from the cool party tricks that YouTube is offering us tonight, I mean, we are here for an important reason, and like it's start a new book time. I can't, I'm always surprised when we accomplish things just because, life is hard. And then I'm always sad after we've accomplished the thing that we set out to accomplish. And then I get excited to start a new thing. Like it's this cycle. But I was exponentially excited for this particular book
Yes.
because I mean, I love Maine and I already have an affinity for being in Maine and things about Maine. But man, if I'm not talking about Maine this year of my life more than any year prior, and I'm excited,
Yeah.
and I want it to. It's for an important reason, not just because I want to talk about Maine all the
Well,
time.
I mean, I can think of 2 reasons why Maine has sort of been in our spotlight. Seminar, of course, right? AQSG
Mm-hmm.
seminar will be in Portland, Maine in October, and we're very excited.
Mm-hmm.
It will be during leaf peeping season. We will be in Portland on the
Mm-hmm.
coast. Oh my gosh, I'm super
Mm-hmm.
excited just from the like going there, factor. I've only been to Maine one time. I went to Kennebunkport.
One, you went to
Huh?
Kennebunk, so you didn't even like go like into like Maine. You were just at, like the tip.
Yeah. Yeah. I did have lobster rolls there though, and I saw the Bush compound. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just a very pretty place, and especially in the fall, like New England, like I mean, like the Mid Atlantic up is just fabulous in the fall. So, I'm looking
So
forward
you
to.
said
But
that was reason one.
that's reason one. What's number 2? It really has nothing to do with me. Are you gonna announce that you have a spot in Maine for your?
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about that. Oh, well, I mean, I can tell people, but it's not like official yet. Meaning, I haven't given anyone money because they didn't want money. That's what makes everything official, you know?
Yeah.
But I am going to bite the bullet and open up an antique booth in an antique shop in Maine. And it's so funny because people might be going like, Jill, you live in Massachusetts. Why would you open an antique booth in Maine? If you're not from New England or haven't spent much time in New England, the states here are significantly closer together. And I can get to the store in Maine in like an hour.
Yeah,
so,
at least the eastern part of the states. I mean, certainly New England has like all of those teeny states like Rhode Island and Vermont and New Hampshire, but then like big states like Maine and Massachusetts have like this giant like junk in their trunk part that is out west, and then there's like
if you like cross the whole state, yes, that's long. But if
but
you just go up the coast,
the up and down, everything's really close together.
People think that New Hampshire has a lot of coastline. It has this much coastline, like this much. When I'm driving to Maine, you hit New Hampshire for 15 minutes, and that's where Portsmouth, New Hampshire is. That's a really big deal. And like, you know, the beaches over there, it's 15 minutes, and then you're at the border of Maine. So that's how much coastline New Hampshire has. And this is at York Antiques Gallery, which is in York, Maine, which is part of this big swath of antique shops along like this one particular route. It's a very nice shop. There are other dealers in there. When I heard that dealers were leaving, I was nervous because that is a fruitful shop for me. There are a lot of dealers in there that sell sewing tools and quilts and things. So when the manager was like showing me like the booth options, and I'm getting a locked case, I had already gone over to like the spot. I'm like, oh my God, please don't let it be these ones. I was guessing who it was based on sales they were having. And when he showed me, I'm like, so it's not either of these ones? And he's like, no. I'm like, oh, because I was going to be sad if, you know, some of my favorite people were leaving. But yeah, so that's happening.
Yeah, it's
and
very exciting.
I should have that by the time seminar's in town. So
yeah, and I'm hoping, I mean, I guess I got to look at my road trip path,
but very easily be able to take a small detour on your way up.
Awesome. Yeah,
it's
so
it's right off the highway.
I will check it out and I will take pictures. I'm sure you'll have pictures to share before then, but I think
I'm actually surprised that you didn't say like, show me everything you're gonna put in there before you do in case I want it.
Well, we'll get there.
I mean, my first thought about it was basically because I have that big Mocklin hoard that I purchased at an estate sale that isn't sewing related, that I was like, I gotta find a way to.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, what we talked about is that you'll probably get that tourist traffic through there, and it'll be, has the potential to be a good. So very cool. So with that in mind, you guys, she heard it from her. It's not a done deal yet, but if you're going to be in the New England area in the fall, gotta be looking for Jill's booth.
I should have it. I should be mine by September 1st, unless somebody leaves earlier than that. But I'm on the list.
Very exciting.
So that's what's up there. Why don't we talk about? Excuse me. Other announcements. It's July.
Yes, you know, this morning I saw something that I belong to, like it's a subscription thing, and they come out with the information, you know, on the 1st of every month. And I saw their email and I was like, why are did they send this stuff out early? And then I went, no, Stephanie, today is July 1st. I was like, how is it suddenly July and it's the 1st?
I don't like it.
Yeah, I could do without it being July already.
I just want to warn everyone. I just heard quite a bit of rumbling. So if my internet,
warning. I'm hearing the same. I think we're having like a massive East Coast thunder
the only
situation.
Nice thing is it's going to cool it down.
Yeah.
But just like to warn everyone, if anything happens to us, don't worry. We still love you. It wasn't because of anything other than weather.
We'll come back unless the power goes out, and I'm knocking on wood.
So yeah, I'm not happy it's July. I'm also not, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not happy the July weather is here. I like sun, I don't like heat. I don't like it at all. I like air conditioning. So even though I don't know, I hope no one can hear it, but I have the air conditioning on in this room, I have a fan on, and it's still, it really takes a lot to get like really comfy in here. I'd probably have to have this on at least a whole 24 hours, and I don't keep it on like that. Anywho, so we're starting the new month, we're starting a new book. That means we're starting a new quarter. And there's things going on that interrupt our lives here. And that is that Stephanie
things going on.
Yeah. She felt it was appropriate to abandon us in the middle of a book to go to England.
Yeah, so sorry.
To go to Festival of Quilts.
Well,
it's
somebody's got to do it. Yes, I will be doing other things while I'm there because I'm there for 9 days. But yes, Festival of Quilts is right there at the end. So I think it's August like 3rd and 4th. Actually, it's right in the middle of my trip, I think. Yeah.
But she has promised to take lots of pictures.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
And if you guys remember, if you guys remember, Mary Fons did. Did she do a live stream or was it just video? I can't remember. She had done like video of, and like you could see like all the stuff. And one of the things they have in Birmingham at Festival of Quilts that we do not have here in the States at our quilt things is a gin and tonic bar.
Oh, I vaguely remember that.
And I certainly hope that wasn't a one-off for that particular day at Festival of Quilts. I hope this is a regular thing because, my gosh, how wonderful to look at quilts and to be able to have a little gin and tonic. And, yeah.
Are you going to have a gin and tonic?
Heck yeah! I love gin and tonic. So, yes, if they are serving gin and tonic at Festival of Quilts, I will be having some quilty gin and tonic.
I rarely ever see you drink. That's why I'm like...
I really, I don't drink much, but, yeah. Yeah, there are some adult beverages that I do enjoy and I will imbibe, so.
Well, come back with lots of stuff. I think because we'd also had to start on the August calendar that we are going to have to be recorded video 2 Tuesdays in a row. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So just a heads up on that. It's not that you'll have nothing. You'll just have something else. And it is going to kind of just like cut our book. We're going to come after she's done. We're going to come back for 1 week to finish up the discussion. And then after that, we have an interview with Lori herself.
Yay! That'll be so much fun.
And then we go into our other scheduled programming of, exhibits and fun things like that. Now, aside from this, I do want to talk about the Maine State Museum real quick. It's currently closed for renovations until 2026. Just a heads up on that, because Lori's book, as you will have read, if you have read the beginning part of this, if you don't, no worries, we're going to tell you about it. This book was supposed to have an accompanying exhibit at the time of the book's release in its 2021, right?
Yes, but there was a little thing called the pandemic going on.
Yeah, there was that. And then the museum, 2021. And then the museum also needed some major renovation. It had some issues. It had some things. So they are closed till 2026 to finish up all of that stuff. Now, here's where AQSG comes in. They are going to get to see the exhibit that was meant for this book when we are at seminar in October. So if you find this really exciting and you potentially want to see it, you need to become a member and come join us, because there are tours, which I'm going to show you in a second. But I wanted to make sure that you at least saw this. This will be in the description, because the Maine State Museum is like a lot of really cool stuff. I've never been there, to be honest with you. It's just never been on my radar. But it's one of those things where the more we learn about stuff, the more we learn about stuff. This museum looks like it encompasses like all kinds of things.
Yeah, it seems like the museum in Charleston, it kind of like they have like these awesome collections of things, but it covers a lot of stuff. It's not just like quilts, textiles. It's like the history, and going way back. Hi, Arlene.
Yeah, hi, Arlene. Like this has, like Women's Long Road, 100 Years to Vote. I was looking at this another page that was like a big like whale skeleton. Like it looks like they've got kind of all kinds of Maine related history.
Yeah,
This is like
yeah.
Industrial Revolution here. So it could definitely be worth your while. Even if you can't go to it right now, it's always a good time to donate and become a member to museums, especially right now that funding is up in the air. But you want to see not just the exhibit for this book, but other exhibits in local museums to Portland where objects are in here. You want to become a member of AQSG because then you can attend Portland Seminar. This page here is on the events tab. It is getting some updates that the marketing committee has decided to add for everybody just to make things even clearer. But there's already been a couple updates. One is you can see the program schedule here, and you can also see general information, which is fantastic. I'll show you that in a sec. But like this is the official quilt of Portland Seminar. There's always a quilt they pick. This one is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at the schedule here, there's Maine State, there's like I think 4 different times you go to the museum.
Mm-hmm.
But at Augusta's Maine State Museum, participants will get a custom preview of the 3,000 square foot exhibit Maine Quilts. It features over 40 quilts from the late 1700s to 2019, including 1790 to 1850 Wabanaki silk ribbon applique, which you just learned about from tonight's reading. A Civil War quilt, 3 1849 to 51 album quilts from Cumberland, Maine, art quilts, including a 2018 Fraz Slade. I don't know who that is. Whole cloth quilt. Several quilts were made or owned by AQSG members. There are other tours on here as well that
Yeah, the brick isn't the brick museum another one, and the Saco Museum.
Saco here. The Saco and the brick store. I believe that's where one of those the pink petticoats that's in here is on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
Steph and I will be. There's all kinds of like. There's so much stuff that happens at seminar, y'all. Like the schedule is bananas.
It really is.
Steph and I will be talking to you about that throughout this whole book because it's really just a great time to highlight that stuff. So, with that, let's crack her open.
Yes. I mean, I have comments from the very start.
Oh,
yeah.
Hold on. Let me just look at my notes real quick because I think I did too. I normally don't make a lot of notes in like the preface and stuff, but I did make one note here about the fact that the Maine State Museum is over 180 quilts, which I found kind of shocking. I didn't expect that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and you know, that's a 3,000 foot exhibit. Like, that's twice the size of my house. Like, that's a lot of wall space.
And their exhibit space isn't full of books.
Or just randomness. Okay. So I would actually like to read this piece because I just think it's so great. I usually like prefaces often are kind of boring or they're just kind of restating like whatever the book is about. But I thought this was so this is literally like the first page of the preface, which I guess is a VII. And it was written by Bernard Fishman, who was the director of the Maine State Museum. I assume he still is. I mean, this was just written a couple years ago, so I assume he still is. So at the very beginning here, he's talking about folk art in Maine, and he's saying like quilts are so widely recognized, and the statement he makes, I think it's beautiful about Maine quilts, but also I think it applies to all quilts. And I'm like, in some of my research, I'm gonna like write this down in my notes because I feel like I'm gonna have to quote this somewhere because this is so good. So he said, perhaps, they're widely recognized and enjoyed by the public. Perhaps that is because quilts are an almost ideal combination of creative craftsmanship and utility. They can be decorative in endless ways, but are universally attached to an essentially utilitarian form that at least theoretically allows them to be used as coverlets or bedclothes. Perhaps it is because quilt making can be a group or social activity as well as a solitary individualistic one. Perhaps it is because the nature of the quilt encourages the creative instinct in so many people. I just loved that. And I was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And some of Lori and Lynn Bassett's writing in here also, I'm kind of like, oh, they really got to the heart of like how I feel about quilts, you know?
Yeah, so I do have to. So for the introduction here, I do have to admit I don't recall off the top of my head if I've read much of Lynn Bassett's writing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have. But I have to say, just from reading her introduction here, I like her style.
Yeah, she's
it's a very accessible style.
You know, I only met Lynn in person fairly recently, but I have seen her lecture a number of times, like a bunch actually, considering I just met her in person. And I think she's very, very like, she's an independent researcher, but she has like a very high academic level, and I think like she does just exhaustive research. And some of the things that I've seen her lecture about, I'm like, how did you find this out? You must have spent like a bazillion hours like combing through information. But I will say she writes that really highly researched stuff at a very accessible level. You know, I think sometimes
and
like
that's not always not always well taken by the academic community. It wasn't when I was doing it.
Yeah, it's not, and unfortunately, it's what makes academic writing so like. Because it's like you slog through the paragraphs, and it's like you spend more energy on trying to decipher the words than what they're really trying to say to you than actually in taking information. But that's why I really like Lynn's writing and also her lectures, because she does, like, I'm not saying she's dumbing it down. It's just she's making it much more accessible.
No, the best scholarship in the world can be taught to a 5th grader. And if you are using language that is overly flowery and performative, in my academic opinion,
right?
You're purposely excluding certain people from the conversation. And I think that's one of the major pitfalls of academia in general, especially probably the humanities a lot. I understand certain science things. You can't always explain those in layman's terms. But I think like I actually had a professor that thought I was an awful writer because I didn't write stylized enough.
And I
just
he was
like the only one.
I cannot reiterate, enough that I just think academic writing a lot of times is just awful. And I'm an educated person, I'm like, I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. But I don't have time in my life. Well, I just don't have time in my life. I do. I just don't have time in my life to like the brain power to, decode all of that and then try to like understand it, right? So, hey Esther, the professor is everything that's wrong with the academy and right 2025.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Esther, oh my god, the stories I could tell you from grad school about that professor and some others, but luckily that professor is retired now. He wasn't a mean man. He was just, in my opinion, a rather classist one.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Yeah, let's jump into, I'm sure you have things to say about Lynn Bassett's introduction.
So the very first thing I need to say, and this comes into a wider conversation that Stephanie and I have been having off screen related to some other things, but I think it's a great time to have it on screen, is this discussion here about quilt documentation projects. So just to give some context, Stephanie and I have been talking about it in the sense of some virtual programming for AQSG, but that was scary. It started a wider conversation about the history around documentation projects, and if I'm understanding this correctly, it looks like Bruce Mann, who was a dealer of Kentucky, was one of the original kind of thoughts here that like, hey, we should get this going, as well as Shelley Ziegert here, who I didn't know was the co-founder of the Quilt Alliance.
I think I had read that a long time ago, and it had just completely, I'd forgotten. Yeah, and we've met Shelley. We know who she is.
So, and if I'm pretty sure Bruce is the dealer that died in a car accident on the way to, I think it was an antique show. That he
Oh
was
my
dealing.
gosh. Okay,
Yeah, if I'm
I didn't
remembering
realize
that
that.
story correctly, I think that's what happened to him.
Yeah, she does say his
Especially
untimely
because she
death.
said his
Yeah.
untimely death. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very interesting that it potentially started. It's again that thing we always talk about where like once you start looking at things, they're all tied together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So starting with, Kentucky, and then let's see, state quilt documentation projects across the country have aided in producing an accurate history of American quilts and quilt makers, revealing the romanticism that colored early quilt historians, which is very interesting because on Stephanie's stream, she's reading the old original quilt history books and often having opinions about the way things were said or things that we know are different now. Or the way concepts were presented. Romanticism of history in the historical record is one of those things that irks me.
Yeah.
It needs to stay in like historical fiction where like it belongs. But I had made a note here. Let me just, where am I?
So Arlene says the movers and shakers of the first documentation projects. Yes, and you know who's a mover and shaker in documentation projects today? It would be Arlene, because Arlene works with, and I mean, I can't remember. Do you hold like an office, or I'm not sure, but Arlene's heavily involved in the California documentation. So I apologize, I can't remember specifically your role in it.
That reminds me, Arlene, we were just talking about you because we're going to talk to you about stuff.
I'll be reaching out.
I'd also made a note here on page XI. Sorry, I don't remember my Roman numerals from a long time ago. The pointed out here of the Gilded Age, with its love of excess and conspicuous consumption, spawned the crazy quilt. Interestingly enough, when we had read the book about crazy quilts, which was Penny McMorris, correct? I don't remember specific reference to the Gilded Age, just time periods.
Right, yeah.
Like in terms of dates.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Gilded Age was here in the U.S., and it was like those last few I guess it's really the last decade or two before. So there's Civil War, then there's Reconstruction, and then there's the Gilded Age. And then you get into, like, turn of the century, the Gibson Girl kind of stuff. Like, all of that is kind of mashed up into the Gilded Age. But I think it's not as common of a term as, because Victorian era is so much more common. But technically, that's England. But I think that's really part of this romanticization. And I'm not even talking about quilters. I think just people in general. There was kind of this like romanticism of the 1980s that I think may have colored some of this stuff with, of course it's following the bicentennial. Lots of people are, kind of jumping into crafts, not just quilting. And I think that romanticism, that pulls all that stuff from the, 19th century into the 20th century, but it changes it. It's like what people kind of wanted to believe. One other thing that I think is really interesting is how she does use the term conspicuous consumption. And I'm like, oh, well, it's kind of the same thing that happened in the 1980s, right?
I mean, we do just keep moving in cycles, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So Arlene's the president of the California Heritage Quilt Project. So yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. And it is 41 years old. Oh, wow. And you're in your fourth year of reviving it. Yeah. So I'd seen all of your materials and stuff when I've been out in California. So very exciting. Granny crafts.
About granny crafts.
I think everything I do is considered a granny craft. There's nothing wrong with granny crafts.
No. Well, that and like there's like millennials are talking now about how they're entering that age where they're getting settled into. One of the things that I think when people talk about granny crafts, and it's when women specifically talk about it, one of the things that they're not saying on purpose, it's just implied, is I'm going to be kind of candid here. They're entering their era of I don't give an F. And that's the era that, quote, your granny's in when she's doing what she wants to do. She's doing it with her mind, with
Okay.
her talent, with her skill. Yeah, and I think a lot of women that are, let's say, late 30s plus, are, if you add in all the things going on in the world, are really getting to their, like, I don't give an F, period.
Late 30s
like,
plus.
I'm gonna sit and crochet. I'm gonna go quilt. I don't care what anyone thinks about it. I'm going to display my thoughts and my feelings on my craft and in my craft, and I think that's why we're hearing a lot about it lately. And like owning it, and like, I'm gonna go play with my plants, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I guess if anything good came out of the pandemic is that people did, like, they looked at hobbies, they looked at crafts, and certainly things. Yeah, as things kind of got back to normal, I think many people sort of dropped their crafts. There was definitely a lot of surveys with quilts, but still, people learned that they liked it.
It really goes to show you what society will do when unburdened by a lot of not just work, everydayness of the cycle of appointments and errands and blah, and your tires rotated and doom
scrolling. Even though I realize you could easily doom scroll during a pandemic, but
I loved not having to go anywhere because like I'm not supposed to. I'm not gonna lie. I quilted in my jammies and I cooked a lot all the live long day. It was great.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. I specifically love here on page XII, this second paragraph down. The goal of the state quilt documentation projects has been to identify regionalisms in style and to illuminate family, local, and state history. So far, the New England states of Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts have produced books recording their findings. Although Maine was part of Massachusetts until 1820, the 200th anniversary of its establishment as a separate state being celebrated in part by the publication of this book, Massachusetts quilts, our Commonwealth, does not include any discussion of quilts from the Pine Tree State. So another point to make here is Stephanie and I had talked in the past about maybe doing some of the state books in our reading cycle, but kind of wondering aloud, like, would that be something people were interested in? Might they not find that necessarily as interesting? We'll try it with Maine, because I will say, God, if we ever did Massachusetts, that is a hefty book.
It is. I have it right down here in my bookcase.
Like,
it is. Yeah.
And I forget they only published like a small number of stuff from the documentation, and Massachusetts is still ongoing. But I like this idea of, yes, we want to look and see at regional styles, which we know there are regional styles of things. But this, illuminate this like family, local, and state history. And there's somewhere else in here, I don't remember where, I might be in the beginning, that Lynn talks about like the micro history of things.
Yes. It was like the micro history of kind of the daily.
Yeah, women and their lives.
Yeah,
and and
domesticity and women's lives. Yes, that's another thing I loved. That.
Oh, I found it. Quilts offer perspective that traditional historic research too often overlooks. The micro histories of domestic economies, families, and women.
Yep.
That was. Ooh, I just got a little goosebump. It's on the very first page at the bottom of her introduction. That
I mean that is so much like, that's what I'm getting at when I say like quilts are documents. Like, it may not tell you a whole lot, but it does tell you, like, some of them have just enough that you get like a real sense of, a person, a family, a domestic environment in a very specific place and time.
Anything else from
to kind of yeah, to kind of just wrap up this intro, XII, which I believe is 13, she had this little quote about from Eliza Southgate after she returned from school. And, you know, she's using quilting as like this metaphor to talk about like all of the ideas and things she learned at school, and that she's kind of trying to put order to it. And she's using patchwork as this like metaphor. And I love that. And, you know, the English language, at least, is full of, you know, metaphors and similes, and I can't remember what the word, idioms, that relate to fiber, not necessarily quilting, but fiber and textiles and all that kind of thing. So I just think it's really interesting that that's what she chose to try and put, you know, an explanation around how she was feeling about her education and her ideas.
I would say, why don't you read it?
Okay. She says, so this is in 1801. She lived in Scarborough, Maine, and she had attended school in Medford, Massachusetts. And so in a letter to a friend, she says, I left school with a head full of something, tumbled in without order or connection. I returned home with a determination to put it in more order. The greater part of my ideas I was obliged to throw away. What remained, I pieced as ingeniously as I could into a few patchwork opinions. They are now almost worn threadbare, and I am about quilting a few more. I beg you will send me any spare ideas you may chance to have that will answer my turn. So, I mean, to me, that she's saying, like, she's formed some opinions about stuff, you know, to be able to speak intelligently and like an educated person, but she's kind of like, I've worn that stuff thin. I need some more, like, to be able to add to my quilt of, you know, educated person opinions. So I thought that was really, it's kind of sweet and sort of vulnerable of her to say. So.
And then on the adjacent page here, this quilt is looking awfully familiar. From Pam Weeks's book. And as a reminder, this is the Davis Dow quilt. And it's in Portland, Maine. And it's in the Maine, or it's from Portland, Maine, and it is at the Maine State Museum. And I think we were told this is probably going to be on view when we're there. I'm pretty sure that's what I heard. I hope I'm not lying.
Yeah, a lot of these quilts are Maine State Museum, right? I mean, obviously there's other entities that have quilts, but I feel like a lot of them are Maine State Museum. Yeah. So, and I have to say, what I was going to say is that I knew nothing about Maine. So, yeah, you just don't necessarily learn this. Like, you don't learn about all the other states as much as you learn about your own state when you're in school. So I had no idea that Maine had been part of Massachusetts. And I guess their 200th anniversary of being like their own state was recently. And does it kind of coincides with this, doesn't it? Yeah.
I also
Mainers are still very salty about Massachusetts. I'm guessing that the term masshole was probably coined by a Mainer.
I don't actually know.
There's no telling. But
I don't know, because we have a pretty decent rivalry with like Connecticut. So, like, I feel some type of, like, I know people think that, like, Massachusetts drivers are some of the worst, and they can be in Boston, and lol. But I will say, if you haven't driven through the cities of Connecticut on the highway, they're crazy. Absolutely crazy.
So what the point, just bottom line, we all voted on Masshole. Bottom line, Massachusetts has got a lot of enemies.
You know why everyone's pissed off that they all came here to see the Plymouth Rock, only to find out that like
it's like this big, the Plymouth Pebble.
It's just a pebble. It's like rated like most underwhelming tourist destination of all time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's got like 1 star on Google reviews.
Oh my god, it's off. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Anywho, so going into chapter 1 here, because I mean we are already like 7:45 for crying out loud.
Well, there's
Go ahead.
there's one very funny story I want to jump into whenever you're ready.
Jump into your funny story.
Okay.
Mine's not funny, so.
So I had heard this, and it's on page 3, where she's talking about Martha Agri Vaughan.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, Martha was aware of what fashionable quilts should look like, but she didn't have any, she didn't have any instruction. She didn't have a book from the library. She didn't have another quilter sitting beside her explaining. So what girlfriend did was she looked at some stuff and she's like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and piece these things together like they do in England. And she had examined, I guess somebody had shown her a quilt or something. She had examined and learned that they had paper in them. So not understanding how that worked, she made the quilt and then she added paper to the back. And I want to say I may have heard this story from Lynn Bassett. And, I'm sure it came out of all the research that she has done, as well as the stuff Lori has worked on. It's just like one of those anecdotes amongst the researchers. But when I heard that, I just was like, oh my gosh, the poor thing, she didn't know. She didn't know that the paper was supposed to stabilize the pieces, and that's how you get nice, clean, even piecing. And then you take the papers out, or sometimes they left them in. So that's where she got all confused. It's just poor lady, and you think about the mistakes people make now in sewing and crafting, and it's, just because they were more in touch with, artisanship and craftsmanship back then doesn't mean that they were these amazing makers. There was lots of not amazing makers in antiquity.
Yeah, and I mean, I just showed her quotes on page 4, and it's 1795 to 1815, 100 by 104 inches.
It's a huge quilt. Yeah.
And that's at Winter.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that it's not perfect, as quoted in here, it's slightly lumpy and irregular, it's gorgeous.
It really is, and I love it. I think it's so cool, and it's got that England look. I mean, this is what quilts coming out of the UK looked like at that time. Mm-hmm. They were definitely influencing, the burgeoning American patchwork. And I still just can't quite wrap my head around what she thought the paper was supposed to do.
Stabilize it, I guess.
I guess.
Arlene just commented on well, actually, Esther also said, until you see Copenhagen. Arlene just said, drivers everywhere are a problem in general. We just went as far as Ohio, into Tennessee and Arkansas, then back to California by car. We decided California is not where all the crazy drivers are.
Okay, so you're looking at the Ohio, Tennessee, Arkansas, and states in between there in California. Arlene, come to Northern Virginia and Baltimore. And I'm sure you've been here before, but if not, it is the absolute hell on earth when you go out on a tour road. I mentioned I went to a quilt study on Sunday. And of course it's a blazing hot day, and it's a Sunday in the middle of the day, and traffic, because of road construction and lane closures and all this stuff, it was just insane. It took me round trip over 3 hours to get to and from, and I only live I want to say 49 miles from, or 59 miles from the place I was going.
Did you make it on time?
I did. In fact, I beat a bunch of other people there that live closer but didn't know about the detour. Luckily, I had left just in time, and Google was telling me, you're going to hit a detour and you're going to be late.
Esther, you think Boston has the worst drivers? Girl. Have you done much driving in Lowell? It's pretty bad.
Oh,
but seriously, I'm telling you, Connecticut, on the highway, the cities, or Route 15. Woo! My God. And then Esther said, too many little narrow roads where you are.
Oh, that's Arlene said that, yes. We do. We have lots of, the highway that goes around Washington, D.C., the Capitol Beltway, the west side, I don't know. It must have used to be a goat path that they paved, because I swear you go, you're and I'm talking
That's
4-lane highway.
I never ever will take 95 down the coastline. Never, never, ever, 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 never. What? Oh, so I wanted to mention here on page 6, the talk here about whole cloth quilts.
Yes, and I learned something I did not know.
I did too. Well, it's funny. So I learned something that I'd had an idea about, and I've seen mentions before, but so I'm wondering if this is the same thing for you. The term
Maybe.
whole cloth implies that the quilt top was made from one wide piece of fabric, but several widths of fabric were needed. So is that the same thing you were talking about?
No, but they just didn't make fabric wide enough.
Right.
I mean,
so there, do you remember my chintz quilt that I have? Okay. So, I always instinctively, when I see that, was calling it a whole cloth because it's all the same fabric. And I had been corrected a couple of times by people to be like, well, if it's not all one piece, it's not a whole cloth. And then I had seen some references because one of my thoughts, like, I was just like, oh, okay. But I had, I was curious because I was like, well, but they weren't making cloth that wide.
Exactly. They did not have 108-inch. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, unless I guess you were making, if you were making the cloth yourself, like, I don't know, like how, so, and then I'd seen a reference somewhere else to like, as long as it's the same fabric, it's still considered a whole cloth. But I once I turned the chart, I'm like, oh, we're talking about whole cloth. I was curious and being like, okay, so this is now more than one reference I've seen when, like, as long as it's the same cloth, it's okay. It's correct to still refer to it as a whole cloth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've just always looked at whole cloths as being, you have to marry it together, right? Just because to get the width. But otherwise, like, there is no piecing. It is just, for all intents and purposes, once it's seamed together, it is one big piece of cloth. Like, I don't know why. I mean, that's like the whole argument over, is a charm quilt really a charm quilt? And when I say charm quilt, I mean a quilt that has fabrics and there are no repeats. So it's usually a simple design, but like the fabric doesn't repeat. You don't have it anywhere else. It's one piece. But is it still a charm quilt if you have like a range of like different colorways of the same print? And I'm like, we are really, really getting down into some minutia that I think we could probably dispense with. But yes, I'm glad to see that is some people that we very much, I mean, Lori LaBar, we very much respect, and Lynn Bassett as well. We really respect like their knowledge, and I'm happy to see that, yes, Lori is confirming what you believe to be true and what I believe to be true.
Also, Esther wants to know if that goat path was Angora goats.
Oh, I wish.
So the whole cloth that we're looking at, which this is where like photography lighting of textiles and books just makes me sad, because you just can't pick up certain things unless you put certain light on things.
Yeah, you can kind of see a little bit up in the corner of the quilting. Yeah, but the thing
actually it's coming in not too bad on here because of my light, but it's this gorgeous blue.
Yeah, but I know, it's
fantastic,
like a really...
is on the adjacent page, Lynn Bassett made a drawing of the quilting on it, which I feel like we don't see enough of this in books.
Right, exactly. And I knew that Lynn had done a number of these I've seen in her lectures, but also Lori has done a number of them. I think there's 2 more in here that are her drawings.
Yep.
And yeah, you just, it's one thing to, you kind of look at it up close, or you kind of like lean back and you look up close, but to actually see like the fabric taken away and just the quilting lines, it's just like, wow, it's so impactful.
Well, even the time to draft this, because even I've been up close and personal, with many a wool whole cloth quilt. And to be able to see the scale and like, on something really dark like this, man, does she have like some eagle eyes?
Yeah, for sure.
And
I'm not sure how they have done their lifting the design. It's entirely possible that they did. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to even guess how Lynn and Lori did theirs, because my guess is they use some digital, maybe. But I do know, like, one way is to literally do a pricking, which I think for the most part museums aren't going to let you do, but these days at least. But you know, there's multiple ways of getting that information. But honestly, if you take a picture of your quilt, if you can see, like, generally see the quilting in it, and it's maybe a little bit dimmer because bright light will blow it out, you can then play with the dark and the light, and you can get sort of, you know, an image, and then you can trace that digitally. That's the way I would do it. And I have done stuff like that. Mine has been more like the quilting, or not the quilting pattern itself, but like the applique of certain quilts I have done that with. Arlene said she'll ask Pat Nichols because she's an expert on charm quilts. I would love to get intel from Pam Nichols. I'm sorry, Pat Nichols, because she is like, she's a California superstar. I was going to say,
part of the discussion you were having about charm quilts, wasn't it with Leah Zeberg?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Who was it? I think, you know, honestly, Arlene, I think it was Leah.
I think it was Leah, and we were talking about it on a stream, and she was commenting about working.
Yeah. So, Arlene, you probably don't have to ask Pat, because I think Leah did answer the question, and it came from the mind of Pat Nichols at some point, because I know Leah studied with her for many, many years, looking at her collection and working with it.
Nick, I want to.
But before we move on, the thing I did not know about it's about the wool. It's not the quilt itself. It's the wool. I knew about calendaring, and that's again where they're you know, pressing it, and it gives it this kind of interesting texture. But what I didn't realize is, so, you know, what you really see prominently in this picture is not really the quilting, but these like lines. And I had always assumed that those lines just came from the quilt being folded up, but it's not. It's the calendaring process, and some of the dye is getting like squeezed into those folds. And they were just buying fabric that looked like that, and I was like, oh wow! I had never heard that before. I had no idea. I just assumed that it just came from the age of the quilt and being folded up. So
yeah, just to give more context, the term calendaring, direct quote, a surface treatment for wool in which steamed or dampened fabric was generally folded before pressing through the heavy hot rollers.
Yeah, and it's like, it gives it like an almost a sheen to the fabric.
I did not really know much about that.
I had see, and calendaring is actually, it's a very, very old process. This is something going back into, you know, into Europe, and I mean, the wool production in England was, you know, that was their main export for millennia or whatever. But that's where that process comes from, is you know, millennia back, long time. So I had learned about it, but just not that part. You know, because I think in where I learned about it was through historic costuming, and that kind of information is not that big of a deal, because you can't necessarily see it the way you can see it on a quilt.
I am on page 9. I like, again,
the medallion.
I've seen many a wool whole cloth, you know, New England quilt. I have never seen anything like this in wool.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Not to say that other things like this don't exist, but wow. Oh, and interesting.
And I love the fact on the next page, there's a picture, the detail picture of it is, I don't know that it's on an actual bed, but it's the fall.
Oh yeah, you can see how the drape happens.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
What's interesting about this is courtesy of Waterville Historical Society and the Redington Museum.
I don't know where that is.
I've been to that area, and I'm just wondering, like, if it's something they, you know, regularly put on display or not. I was just thinking out loud, really. It's not. I was just thinking, like, hey, maybe I could get, like, look at, oh my god, that detail. It's even showing up pretty good on the screen.
Esther said Waterville is just outside of Augusta.
Yeah, I've been up there. Um, hmm.
So, yeah, I just, in looking at that, at the first page, I was like, oh, wow, look at all that dense quilting. I mean, I wasn't even like the medallion aspect of it. I was like, whatever, just the quilting on this. And I will tell you, I have quilted with wool before. Wool top, not a wool backing, cotton backing. It is not easy. And what I would say is the wool I was using is wool suiting, maybe thicker than it was back then. I mean, they could get some really fine, amazingly fine wool, like wool gauze. Like, it just, we don't make stuff like that anymore, basically. So the wools that they were using in these quilts may have been finer than what I was using, but it's not easy to quilt through. I mean,
no, I wouldn't think so.
Not that it's hard to put the needle through, but getting the needle back up. If
you can't do the rocking, right?
Well, I mean, see, that's the thing. I don't know, because I don't like my when I hand quilt, I don't do the rocking because I'm not good at it. I just do like lap quilting kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like you can't get that because the thickness of of the wool. So I'm very curious, like, to like see these kind of things up close and personal, because I can't quite fathom like how thick is the quilt sandwich.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, from the ones that I've looked at the New England Quilt Museum, like, compared to the thin cotton masterpieces with like homemade thin cotton batting in them, they're significantly thicker than that.
Yeah.
And I would think you definitely would need, at least I think, a thicker needle for one, because of the weave isn't anywhere near as tight as a cotton weave is, and the threads are so much thicker, like you said.
Even with the calendaring process, because the calendaring process, I thought, kind of just it's not really felting it, but it kind of like gives the wool like a.
But it still ends up pretty thick.
Mm-hmm.
With everything on there, because I'm thinking about the needles you were using for quilting cotton, and you get 10 stitches
mm-hmm.
per inch, 10 to 16.
I can't fathom. You can't get that many stitches per inch.
That's what I mean. Like, I can't even fathom using a needle that fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm actually wondering, like, since this was already talking about, we're seeing, the migration of skills from England into, the colonies. I just wonder, which we may just find out later on reading more.
Yes.
Are we looking at a different kind of quilting at the beginning of...
Yeah. Well, what I do know is, so Welsh quilts, which are very often wool, that's like a hallmark of a Welsh quilt, medallions. I mean, obviously, these early quilts in here in the book definitely taken a page from England, even though patchwork is an American thing. The early stuff came from like what they were looking at in England, and the Welsh quilts they're not quilted like this. The needle isn't doing one of these. Theirs quilted with a backstitch.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And so the back of the quilt, literally, I mean, you know what backstitching looks like. So I'm wondering if they used a technique like that at all. I don't know. I haven't had the ability to examine this kind of stuff the way you have. So, but Esther, I wanted to say, Esther had suggested, I wonder if it matters how the wool is spun and prepped, and the type of wool, like a long hair wool might be more like cotton. Yes, I do think you're correct there. It's the staple is the length of the fiber. Wool does have a longer staple, and wool thread does tend to be kind of like clumpy, but you can get like a very, very fine thread with certain types of sheep. So yeah, definitely. And I think varieties of sheep that I think even today that are not necessarily bred anymore, I think there's a lot more of that in England, and it's more of like a, on a small scale here in the States, people kind of hobby farms and that sort of thing that produce that kind of wool. Yeah. I don't know.
She also just said, I wonder if it's more about the springiness of wool versus thickness.
Yeah, I don't know. A heritage wool collection. Interesting. We'll have to talk more about that later. I'm interested.
It almost makes me feel like we should host like a little retreat of like, you know, historical archaeology where, you know, I'm sorry, experimental archaeology where we're like trying out all of this, you know, stuff like
but again, I also have to go back to the fact that some of these fabrics that women were working with back then, they're just not made today. You know, or if they are made, some version of them is made, there's synthetics, like synthetic. It's really hard to buy 100% wool. Like imagine when Joann was open, the entire time I worked there, we got one bolt of fabric that was still not even 100% wool. It was like 50-50.
But what about some of the places, you know, like Sturbridge or Colonial Williamsburg?
Yeah, so it's specialty purveyors of goods. Burnley and Sturbridge is one. They get a lot of stuff for, you know, they're right there in Williamsburg, I think, and they source from all over the place, things like linen and,
I was gonna say,
and wool.
A person to be part of this conversation is definitely Pam Weeks, because she recently visited somewhere in New Hampshire that is like a historic working farm kind of scenario that's making a lot of things. I forget exactly what she was saying about it, but I feel like if she was here, she'd be like, oh yeah, you got to go to this place. You can get all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, see, Arlene, if I think I have too much space between stitches, I will backstitch. I have seen it in super early quilts. Okay. Yeah. So that might be the case, that some of this stuff, again, people that were first generation, you know, their ancestors were coming here, like Plymouth Rock people or whatever, the quilts they were making very well could have been using that. Yeah.
And Esther wants to live and work on a historic working farm. I mean, Esther, I don't know if there's anything like that in Maine, but we have Sturbridge Village here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I'm not too far from Williamsburg.
And I think I feel like maybe historic Deerfield might do some stuff too. But
yeah,
I haven't been to Sturbridge since I was a grade school child. I know it's shocking and it's terrible of me because I go to Sturbridge all the time for antiquing purposes. But like, hey, Esther, if you want to go to Sturbridge Village to poke around, not when it's 100 degrees, I'll go. We can see about getting you a job.
Right. Get me one while you're there. So if we may move ahead to Perlina's quilt.
Well,
did you have something else? Yeah, this one.
What page were you talking about?
It's page 11.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to go to petticoats. Go ahead, talk about that.
Perlina's quilt, I just love it. And I think that there's a comment in here how it really has this kind of modern look to it, and I would 100% agree. You know, I don't know what her plan was there, you know, if she envisioned it to look like that, or if it was a matter of trying to figure out, like, with a limited amount of fabrics, how she could put them together. But I just love it. I mean, looking at it, I'm going like, modern quilt, modern art, modern painters. Every time I see something like this, I'm like, okay, Rothko. All right, Rothko, with your $1 bazillion stupid red painting. Look at this. You copied these things. All right, petticoats.
Yes, I wanted to talk about, so 12 and 13. There's two matching petticoats that they discuss are likely cut from the same exact cloth. The reason I wanted to highlight these is because one of these is owned by the Brick Store Museum, which is one of the field trips at Seminar.
I think they both are Brick Store.
Are they both?
Yeah, I think they're both. Oh no, one is Maine Historical Society. Sorry, one's Maine Historical Society.
I'm pretty sure. Hold on, I wonder. Now I can't remember which one. One of these places, because we go to both of them.
Yeah.
On field trips, but one of these places you get to see the petticoat in person. So, I really wanted to make sure that was a big deal. Now, I wanted to talk to you about your historical costuming days, because in reading this, about how, well, for one, it's very interesting to me that in the historical record, you're often seeing, if they refer to just quilt, that they're talking about a quilted petticoat and not a bed quilt. They make a separate distinction. But I want you to talk to me about how these were meant to be seen and
Yes.
the type of garment wearing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, and this is a time period we're talking about, like, American Revolution time period. We're talking late 1700s. And yeah, so the dress then, it's a robe à l'anglaise, which is like the English robe. And then there's a French version, and I want to say there's the Polonaise, which is meaning Polish. But basically, and you're probably all familiar with what the garment looks like. You've seen it. It's like that Betsy Ross gown. But basically it's kind of like, this top, you might have like the floofy sleeves. It's kind of like the top part of it is sort of a like kind of a shorter or 3/4 length, and then it would have like a blouse underneath that kind of is floofy, and the top part could close in different ways, but then when it came down to the waist, it's split open in the front. So this stuff was meant to be seen. Like and we think of petticoats nowadays, it's often like, you think about like poodle skirt, big floofy tulle petticoat that is to give volume to a skirt, or the hoop skirts of the 1980s wedding gowns and stuff. That's what people think of petticoats today. But petticoat back then was like a skirt. It's a skirt. These are wool to keep your legs warm, but it's meant to be seen, and that's why they quilted them with these gorgeous designs.
And
because they were a showpiece.
I feel like we might have been at a Penn Dry Goods show. I'm vaguely remembering that a dealer had a petticoat there like this, and we were talking about it because of the discussion. I don't remember where. It might have been a lecture that I didn't attend. Maybe you did. I forget. But it was a discussion about that a particular petticoat was really well intact on the inside, which was proof that there was like a protective layer worn so that it didn't touch the skin.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, there would be layers and layers. So your bottom layer is a chemise or a shirt. I think for women they were called a chemise, but it's essentially like a nightgown. It's like a very fine, either linen or cotton, sort of blousey nightgown thing. It'd be sort of long. Men would tuck it into their breeches, their pants, whatever. Women, it's just a long thing. And then on top of that, then you put either a corset or a bodice, depending on the time period. And then on top of that, the corset would have the hip springs, that come down below your waist. And that is what holds the weight of the petticoats. And you typically would have under petticoats, which are, again, it's about keeping you warm. And also sort of holding, if you've got a quilted petticoat, that's heavy. And so all of this is just about keeping you warm and also kind of having the volume of skirts.
The weight dispersion, yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And so yeah, there might be
too.
It really is. And today, when people today talk about these garments and they're like, oh, it's so heavy and hot, and you're not wearing it right. Like, you have to have the corset, but you have to have the stuff under the corset or the bodice. They called them bodies back then, bodice. But yeah, you would have stuff underneath these petticoats. There might be 2 or 3 more, and again, it all has to do with like what your station in society is. Like, are you rich? Are you working class? Depended on what you wore. But yeah, there might be something that's kind of like a wool flannel underneath, and a variety of other kinds of things. So yeah, they definitely didn't touch the skin at all. Something like this, absolutely not. Your outer garments, you didn't want that stuff getting body oil on it. That's how they kept it clean, was by having these under things that kept it away from your body. Yeah.
That is very interesting. I also, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like obsessed with the fact that it's pink.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Do we think it was, I don't, I'm just wondering, do you think it would have been actually dyed to be pink, or is... There are
Well,
chances
I mean, I
it's
kind of
red,
wondered
but-
if it was maybe a red, but it could be like a dark bright pink. I don't know.
Because, like, in this close-up photo on page 13, like, it is pink.
Yeah, it really is. It's very pink. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like maybe this is sort of true to color. I think.
I
You know,
hope
when
so.
I've seen this kind of stuff in museums, and again, I have not had the privilege of like up close and personal looking at things like this, but in museums, definitely this time period, they had that color. You know, it's not always a faded red. They could achieve, you know, variations of pinks and things. So. Yep.
Moving on here, the section here about cutting corners, discussing how, you know, a lot of quilts in New England were made for 4-poster beds and have the traditional cutouts. So
Yeah.
it's good. You know, I've heard from quite a few of our historian friends a couple of things. One, like, if it's a quilt with cutouts, it's from New England. And two, if it's really big, it's likely really old.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that is the thing that, you know, Dr. Dunton, if you remember, I can bring him into any conversation. I mean, he did that research, and he had these crazy anecdotal stories about, like, you know, the more feather beds, which basically are mattresses or sort of like those heavy duvet kind of things, the more of those you had to stack up on a bed, you know, meant that you were wealthier and well-to-do because you could invest in all that. And so then you would need a quilt that was big to be able to drape over all that. And he has some kind of anecdotal story about, you know, a lower class person that was trying to keep up with the Joneses sort of thing. And she would stack her feather beds up, but she would, like, you know, like, think about a feather pillow, how you kind of, you know, she would, like, make the center sort of hollow and push all the feathers to the side so that it looked big, but my God, when you got inside of it, it just went thunk. Because it was made to look like many feather beds stacked on top of each other, but it really wasn't. It was like the feathers had all been...
Well, like, just going back to look at the first quote we looked at there, the Martha Agri Von, the medallion there. We've got the cutouts, right?
Yep.
But this quilt is also 100 by 104.
Yeah, so
And
that's like
it's
that's king size for today, isn't it? Isn't that about king size?
Yeah, about that. Yeah. And this is 1795 to 1815. And in, like, a quote, like, juxtaposition to that, when we were reading Pam Weeks's book, and they were talking about quilts for the Civil War, and they wanted, like, thin and narrow, and think, like, it's just... There was another one I was looking at. The wool medallion that I showed there with the sun in the middle. That's 108 by 92.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, these were definitely massive.
like, for something as heavy as wool can be.
Oh yeah, can you imagine how heavy that thing was?
Well, I'm just thinking about my Bonnie Hunter quilt that I made that's like 90 by 90. And that thing was so heavy it's very seam heavy, of course, which these wools are not. But when I was pinning it, because it had 7,000 intersections, I had to hold up each end of the row on the counter with peanut butter jars because they kept, like, sliding. Oh my. I should show a picture of that quilt, shouldn't I? Anywho.
So, as far as corners go, my favorite quilt in here is the one with the replaced corners. Because she was like, you know what? I'm not liking these cutout corners. I'll put the corners back in. And you know, the thing is, looking at it, and I realize this is just a picture. Maybe it's more obvious in person. But I don't... it's on page 17. Sorry. And looking at this, if I didn't have that information, it never would have occurred to me that is what had happened. I would not have noticed it because there's enough, like, I don't know if it's fading or, you know, I mean, it's probably a lot of, like, just how the maker designed this. It just would not have stood out to me. I would have not noticed. But I thought that was pretty funny.
If I really look close at the corner seam.
Yeah, you can see I kind of press my nose against the book, and you can kind of see, like, a thing there. And probably up close, if I was up close, like, looking at this quilt on a table or on a bed, I probably would notice. But, if I really looked at it. But I just love the idea of going, like, you know, I don't like these cutout corners. I'll put the corners back in. You gotta love a quilter that will do something like that.
My favorite is this one.
Yes, that one is very cool too. Yeah, both pages, they're both very neat quilts.
Well, and the one on the adjacent page, R21, is 99 by 115, and the one I just showed is 105 by 106. But the one that I just showed you, I specifically like. It says, one example with strong Maine provenance was made in Ceylon, I think I'm saying that right, between 1830 and 1835 by a member of the William and Catherine Rice Paul family, likely Catherine herself. It is by far the most complex of the group of pieced and embroidered quilts. It is also the most colorful, incorporating black, brown, orange, and green wool in a combination similar to that of another quilt we were looking at. The member of the Paul family who made it probably drafted the pattern herself. And that is a very intricate pattern. It has an inset. Oh, this is at the Museum of Fine Arts. This is at, which I believe the Museum of Fine Arts is across the street from the hotel that we're staying at in Portland. I'm pretty sure that's the Museum of Fine Arts.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll have it on me. But anyways, there's this inset photo here of a detail of the embroidery in one of the blocks. What I wish we had an inset photo of too was a detail of
the llama?
The border.
Oh.
Of course, like, leave it to you to, like, pay attention to this. Man, it makes me wish I had a magnifying glass of this, like, one random block.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. That edge is really cool, that border. And of course, I love a scalloped edging or border. But yeah, that whatever those, like, I mean, some of them, they almost look like the devices that are in Pennsylvania Dutch, like that. It's
the hex sign?
It's sort of like, it's almost like it's sort of a whirling shaped thing. The one with the four arms, and I don't want to call it, I mean, it's kind of got like swastika vibes, but it's not what it is. They're rounded. It's almost like you took like a long teardrop and then turned it kind of like a fan blade. Like, that's what it reminds me of. Those are on like the hex signs in the Pennsylvania Dutch area, that kind of device. So that must be like just a symbol that kind of proliferated. But yeah, as I was reading this, I was like, girlfriend, she was stitching like, scenes from her community and everyday life. And then she's like, I'm gonna put a llama in my quilt. And I'm like, you go for it. And like the chances of her of ever having seen an actual llama are like slim to none. So it had to have come from some kind of book, right? I just love that. And it's a pretty, I mean, for what the little detail I can see of it, it's pretty llama-ish. She did a good job.
For the sake of time here, I was going to say, why don't we like maybe look at a couple of things from the gallery here in the back of the chapter. One that I want to bring up is on page 26 and 20. No, I'm sorry. It's
24 and 26. The whole cloth.
24 and 26. Is like we've got another whole cloth here that obviously has a lot of quilting.
Here's its quilting.
And then Lori herself has done an insane drawing. And you can see then on 25 too, like it is a good photo that does capture
her name. And I love that when you're laying in bed, you can look down and see like the name. You can read the name when you're laying in bed. I just, in looking at the picture, that Lori drafted of the, this quilting, it's so interesting to me that like none of these, including the one Lynn had here earlier from, the Lynn Bassett drawing from the Hussey Tarbox quilt, none of it's symmetrical. You know, I mean, I feel like today, you know, we look at something, if it's in the grid, we tend to do something symmetrical, you know, like every block has the same thing, or,
Oh, I
you know,
see.
you've got,
Like, kind of, you can definitely notice if you start in the center there.
yeah, none of it's symmetrical. I mean, you've got like, I mean, they're all the same kind of devices, and yeah, around the edges, those fan-shaped things, or half Dresdens, or whatever you want to call them, those things are all symmetrical, but everything going on the middle, the feathers and everything, it's very like organic. You know, there's no symmetry there, and I mean, I gotta say, I like it. You know, it's I mean, you kind of have, like, if you have a flower on one side, you also have a flower on the other side, but they're not positioned the same. They're not.
No, it does give the illusion of symmetry when you first glance.
Yes, it does. But I really I like that.
Borders,
I think it's a bold choice.
Yeah, well, it's, for one, it's the borders on the outside are pretty symmetrical.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you get on the inside there, it's very swirly doodah. I also wanted to point out that this book is 105 by 113. Holy moly!
Yeah. And I'm curious to know. So in something like a whole cloth quilt like this, you know, and they do mention, I want to say she mentioned somewhere in here markings. I don't think it was something else I was reading this week. I think she mentions in here about markings, but I'm just curious, like, I mean, again, look at this. Like, even today, if you were going to mark out a quilting design, you know, to hand quilt, you know, how would you do? I mean, I guess I would take it in sections, you know, and but you something like that, you would have to draft it out full size, you know.
My other question in that regard would be about the actual task of quilting this. Are we talking about a long arm frame that's chilling at the ceiling and you've got the whole thing on it potentially? Or are we talking a smaller frame where you're just doing part of it at a time and you're moving it? And I'm wondering,
I mean, even one of those big frames, you still, like, the quilt is not, I mean, the quilt
we've seen
still
old
has
photos
to get,
where it looks like the quilt's, like, the whole thing's on it.
yeah, but because you can't reach the middle when it's like that, that's
deceiving. No, I know, you have
to
move, you have to move it, but that's what I'm asking. I'm asking in terms of drawing it.
Oh,
because
yes,
if you
exactly.
got it all out, right, at one point, that might make it easier to conceptualize certain things, but if you had to move it to draw each time,
there's no way you would do this. Yeah. That's, and I mean, I could see something like having some type of template, like, you know, that sort of paisley shaped thing with the crosshatch, and I don't know, is that supposed to be a pineapple or something? I don't know what that is. But like that thing, like maybe you have sort of some type of template or something for that thing, and, like, you know, you move it around and put it in the places you want it to go, and then you kind of connect it. But she's connecting all of those things with all of these vines and feathers and stuff. It's just, it's
and lots of like very leafy.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Pretty darn amazing.
And then I love just, you know, it's all, to be honest with you, if you didn't tell me when this was from, I would think this would be, you know, 20th century schoolgirl doodling on the outside of her shopping bag covered science book.
Yeah.
You know, or especially when those, like, milky gel pen things came out in the 90s. Yeah. Oh my God. We used to do drawings on our hands with those pens. And it was lots of swirly doodah, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it reminds me of.
Wow.
That's the one I picked out of the gallery. Why don't you pick one here out of the gallery?
Well, I would say, you know, the last three, but especially the last two. I think it's the pieced embroidered wool quilt, pieced embroidered, so they're both maker unknown, both likely Maine. Let's see, the one on page 30 is New England Quilt Museum. May I come see this quilt? And
I don't think I've ever seen this one in person.
And then page 31, it's from the Winneter. But yeah, I mean, they're very, very similar looking, you know, in terms of, you know, these black blocks that have pretty dense embroidery on them, and then they're separated by, some just sort of blank stuff. But they're very, very striking. And yeah, I think they're so interesting. And I don't, when I think about this like black fabric with kind of embroidery on it, I don't know if I've seen a lot of quilts like that. And so I'm wondering if that too is this like a very New England kind of thing, because I don't know, I guess if I saw these quilts like out of context, I think I would look at these blocks and go, oh, I wonder if that's like a precursor to like crazy quilting, because they like to embroider on pieces of black velvet. So I don't know, I think they're really fun, and I would love to see these up close and look at the details in the embroidery.
I'm writing down this quilt because if you don't remember, the Sunday before seminar, which is October 12th, there's a New England Quilt Study Group Day event that's going to be at the New England Quilt Museum and at the Woodman in New Hampshire. And Laura Lane, the collections manager, she's doing a specific exhibit of older stuff because seminar is close. But our group might also include a turning, and it could be interesting to request some things like from this book, since seminar is all about that. So now maybe you'll have to come for it.
I will be forced in order to see this quilt up close. But yeah, so the one on page 30, I feel like I like the one on 31 better. Just I like its sort of simplicity better. But I do have to say the one on 30, it's got those two pieces at the top that are kind of reddish, whereas the rest are, I don't know, like a brownish orangish color. I'm wondering, were those two like what we often see is like they just didn't have enough fabric, so they had to use something else, or is it changes in dye lots and stuff? I don't know. I don't know that red would fade to that brownish color, so I'm assuming it's two different fabrics. But I just love that. I love it when you look at a quilt and you're like, yeah. And you're like, what is that oddball thing? Why did they do that? And we see it very often. We see it definitely. I saw a quilt at the quilt study I was at this weekend, and it was because our theme was tiny, miniature. So it was everything from doll quilts to baby quilts to just quilts that had very small piecing. And there was one that it was gorgeous. It was just like very scrappy, very tiny little bits, and there was this one section that like towards the bottom that has had this bright gold colored fabric, just this one block. And the rest of it was all fairly, like, I don't want to say muted, but just kind of fairly, some blues and some browns and stuff, and then the gold. And one thing that they said, and I realize I'm digressing a little bit, but one thing they said about that is there is this anecdote, and I don't think anybody has ever been able to prove it. So please, anecdote, y'all. I'm not saying this is true. But there was this idea that people would put like a bit of gold fabric in their quilt because of the gold standard. And like,
I don't know that I've ever heard that anecdote.
Yes, the importance of the gold standard in the U.S. and that, at the time quilts were made, that it was like, oh, put a piece of gold in your quilt. And I'm like, if there's any truth to that, my guess is it was like a handful of people that did it, and then other people were like, I don't know why, but apparently you're supposed to put this one piece of gold fabric in your quilt. Like, I feel like that's how things like make their way down, through history. Or it could just be coincidental. Not a lot of people had like bright yellow gold fabric, and if they did get a piece of it, they were like, I want to get this in the quilt. It's the only piece I have. That's probably more likely. But,
where nowadays we're like, this is the only piece I have. I'm afraid to cut it up and put it in the quilt.
Hey, Janet. Late to the party. Well, I normally say like you're never late, but yeah, we're getting ready to wrap up here. So, but I'm so glad you did make it. And half the sewing room is done. Well, that's a priority. So if you only were able to get some of your reading done, your sewing room is a priority. And I sent you an email. Good things happened today. You know what I'm talking about.
Well, and as we're wrapping up, I do realize that I totally forgot at the top of the hour during all those announcements to give the reading assignment for next week.
Yeah, we need that, don't we?
Yeah, thank goodness I go back and put it in the description now. But anywho, so for next week, where's my calendar? Which is the 8th. We're gonna read chapters 2 and 3, which are pages 32 through 90. Don't be afraid.
Ooh, that's a lot, but no, there's a lot of big pictures of quilts.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I will also say, generally speaking, just to kind of prepare you, that this book seems to have a lot more text than the last one, but there's a lot more photos intermingled into that text as well. Mm-hmm. So, and then also I can kind of tell you right off the bat here that just in case you ever miss out or you're not sure, we're now taking this in chunks of 2. So it'll be 2 and 3, then 4 and 5, then 6 and 7. And we've saved 8 for the last time because we often end up needing more time at the end to go back. So that's how we're doing.
We went off the gold standard in 33. Yeah, so if there's any truth to that gold thing, that maybe going off the gold standard, I don't know. I think all of the quilts were definitely, like, that we were looking at were either very early 20th century or late 19th century, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm just like, what does the gold standard have to do with anything, like, when you're quilting? I don't know. It seems like one of those things that sounded like, to somebody, like it sounded good, and they were like, this must be it. And then that story started proliferating in the quilt study realm.
Maybe.
But yeah, I actually, when they talked about it at the quilt study I went to, and then somebody else was like, let's make sure we say there is absolutely no proof that this is what people were doing, but it's, just an anecdote.
Mm-hmm. Esther just said The Wizard of Oz is about the gold standard change. The Cross of Gold speech by Brian is the Tin Man's speech in the movie. Interesting. I've never made that connection.
Maybe the gold standard was more important than we thought it was.
Maybe this is a new research topic for someone.
Not me, but yes. Somebody. Esther, maybe it's your new research. Yeah, that would actually be an interesting thing to look into. But I mean, without any kind of like diaries or, it's often hard to dig down into that stuff, So yeah, I guess going off yeah. Hard pass. Well, I tried.
Well, that's all right. I am pooped and I need some food.
Yeah, I did get my my dinner eaten, but it's time for dessert. I gotta go have like some ice cream or something because it's hot and I deserve ice cream.
Oh, and yeah, what were those Oreos you were telling me I have to go get?
Okay, guys. All right, here's the final thing I will leave you with. If you live
and this is apparently the most important thing of the whole evening.
This is, if you live near Walmart or ever shop at a Walmart, get yourself over there soon, because if you like Oreos, they have the best short release Oreos. They are the Selena Gomez Oreos. Now, I'm not a huge fan of her music. I think, I've seen things she's acted in, and I've liked those things. She was in No Murders in the Building. She's like one of the main characters. Anyway, she has released with Oreos, the Selena Gomez Oreos. They come in a smaller package than regular Oreos, which makes me very mad because they are delicious. They are chocolate and cinnamon. So the cream in the middle.
I'm thinking this is really sus.
The cream in the middle is both chocolate and it's white and brown. So it's chocolate and cinnamon. And the Oreo cookies are a little cinnamony. Just a little bit. They're so good. Reminds me of like Mexican hot chocolate. So if you know what that tastes like, that's what these cookies taste like. They're mwah, chef's kiss. So go get some. Because I'm going to buy them all.
Apparently the Shaw's near me has them too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been finding them at Walmart. So that's just, what's near me. But yes, seek them out and get them while you can. Because I guess they're only here for the summer and I'm buying them all. So. It's like those, what is it, the ketchup Lays? Wasn't it all the people would go up to Canada? Like all the people from the States would drive up to Canada to get the ketchup Lays, which I think sound awful, but you know, to each their own. All right, guys. Have a wonderful evening. Jill, enjoy your dinner. I'm going to go enjoy some dessert.
Yeah, maybe I gotta go get some Oreos.
I say it's a good idea. All right, guys. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.